which is being run by the women. A supply chain, we all know, has been completely broken, whether it is essentials or otherwise. Many problems that, Alkaji, that you talked about are the real life challenges, women being the caregivers, plus also in many households, which Chetna ji kind of has nurtured, are the ones where they're also livelihood earners. So I think both livelihood has and the caregiving thing has put a double pressure on them. Livelihoods are broken as well. So I think that whole thing needs to be recreated. We have a great panel with us. So Alkaji, of course, from the ministry. She's Joint Secretary, Minister of MSME. Chetna ji, of course, who doesn't know her for the great work that she's doing. And thank you, ma'am, for being there. She's also very kindly agreed to kind of steer us on the Women Empowerment Program, which has taken a bit of a backseat because of this whole COVID issue. But we had a very, very nice chat with her, and I want to take some of her ideas forward. Preeti Dmello, of course, welcome. She's chairing the D&I committee that FICCI is running. So good to have you, Preeti, there. Reddy. Uma, of course, has been a long support for FICCI and the CMSME. She's an entrepreneur and otherwise also very active member of FICCI. Suhasini Singh, country manager, Fairwear Foundation. We have Megha Chawla, partner, Bain and Company, and of course, Nishtha is there from the UN Women. So thank you everybody for joining in. The idea, of course, we all know women participation is low. The figures are known to everybody. I don't think we need to talk about that. The idea really was to kind of get together to see the kind of impact COVID has had on the women's supply chains, but it is not just about the problems. I think there are opportunities, maybe latent ones, which can be converted into a real life valuable opportunities. People like Chetna ji and all work with these women on a daily basis, so we'll be able to reflect on that better. I think this whole thing of need for masks and PPEs, etc., we do see a role. I think some of the SHGs are playing a role in that. This can be a new livelihood opportunity for all of you. It'll be great to listen as to how this can be multiplicated, replicated, because masks, the need for mask is not going to go away that fast, given the way Corona is expanding by the day. Till, of course, we have a final solution come in. We're all talking about new normal. So this new normal, what are the opportunities which come our way? The problems are there. If we can collectively think of kind of trying to overcome the problems being faced by these women, I think that will be great. Apart from, of course, also increasing the share of women enterprises and so on and so forth. I think Minister of MSME has had this SWAYAM platform for a very long time. I'm also part of it. So I see a lot of activity happening there. We all know women can come together. They are a horsepower of energy, so they can really create a lot of valuable opportunities and a lot of valuable propositions for everybody. So without much ado, I invite Alka ji for her quick remarks, and then we move to the rest of the panel. So Alka ji, over to you.
Jyoti, if I could just come in, sorry, I will just ask, just introduce Nishtha here quickly, who's moderating our session for today. So thank you so much, Nishtha, for joining us and moderating this session. Very thankful to UN Women for that. And Ms. Nishtha Satyam, of course, was appointed as Deputy Country Representative for UN Women, and the entity of United Nations that is dedicated to working towards gender equality and women's empowerment. And in India in January 2018, she is the youngest deputy country representative for the entity of the UN across 193 countries. She formerly managed strategic partnerships, policy impact, and public relations for the UN Women Multi-Country Office for India, Bhutan, Maldives, and Sri Lanka. Nishtha has also served as the private sector partnership specialist with the Office of the Resident Coordinator of the United Nations and UNDP. Prior to her career with the UN, Nishtha has worked with leading firms such as KPMG and American Express as an economist. As a futurist and as a feminist, she is an advocate of the urgency to mainstream women across the marketplace, workplace, and community. Nishtha has authored a number of studies on the business value of inclusion and continues to be excited about using her multi-sectoral experience to inform the interplay of policy, politics, and people to foster lasting change for the most marginalized. Nishtha holds a master's degree in international business from the University of Nottingham, UK, and a bachelor's in economics from Delhi University. So Nishtha, I would request you to kindly moderate the session and invite our panelists, please. Yeah, thanks.
Sure, thank you. I just want to do a quick mic check, if you can hear me.
Yes, we can. You're audible.
Lovely. Okay, so, I'd love to take this opportunity to welcome. It's always nice to see people dressed up on the other side, even during a lockdown. It brings back so much more energy and enthusiasm and life back in these very unprecedented circumstances. I just want to reiterate that as UN Women, and of course in our collaboration with FICCI, and the opportunity that has been given to us as a part of a larger program that we have with the European Union, we are tremendously encouraged by the response that we have to this webinar, and I'm extremely glad to actually be online with you, particularly with, along with Alka ji. I know in the beginning he said, "Ji mat lagao," but I find it very hard. But in collaboration with Alka and many others that have joined us here. Now, the truth of the matter is that I don't think any of us who are really on this webinar or anywhere in the world, though the UN has tremendous experience of handling disasters, pandemics, and epidemics, has really seen something of this scale. And a lot of us have at least not had a personal experience of managing a situation like this, where you see almost an uncomparable stop and halt to the economy. You see women immediately being kind of thrown back into the margins, to see that some gains that we had thought we had made as a country are now being reversed at a rate that is almost unthought of. And that's the reason we wanted to have this webinar. And of course, the two big aspects of being with you today is to, of course, problematize, which essentially means that layer and nuance our problems and our understanding of what the situation is. And of course, the second is use the collective wisdom in this room, in this virtual room, to unlock what could be potential solutions or scalable solutions to some of these situations. The topic for today, of course, sorry, I'm also going to be looking into my phone a little, so you'll see a little bit of eye movement, but it's because some of my notes are on the phone. I think this reading from somewhere and talking somewhere is a slightly newly gained skill, which I haven't mastered. The topic for today is really responding to the impact on the supply chains. Now, honestly, there are about 3 kinds of issues before we get into moderation that I'd like to detail or put in front of the audience. One, I think, is the obvious economic part of it, where we see that people are out of jobs, they're not a part of the economic mainstream any longer. So how do we really get them back? Are we envisioning a world which is really on just a pause button, which means that you click that button and everything comes back just the way it was? Unfortunately, having studied a few pandemics across the globe, I don't particularly envision this to be a pause button that if we click on is going to all resume into normal, into what we knew as normal. And just like a graffiti on a Hong Kong wall said, we probably should not even come back to the normal, because that was a part of the problem initially. So one is, are we at the brink of conceiving what we think is a new economic model or a new economic reality in supply chains? 2 is, how do we, while we know that it is already going to be difficult to get women back into the supply chains, there are some contrasting realities here, and let me put that out. On one end, while I think because, when the economy opens up, men or skilled workers will probably come back easier, quicker, and therefore the largely unskilled workforce, or what we call the unskilled workforce, not necessarily is probably going to take a long time, or might be pushed more into the margins. We have to understand that a large number of women fall into that bucket. However, what is also interesting is this new work from home model that is both maybe not particularly for rural India, but a large part of India where women are concentrated, is also emerged as the new model of sustainability. So people have for the first time tried it out and have understood that it is not as unsustainable as it looked. It is probably it is also an opportunity to give a boost probably to women who have always chosen the model but have never had access to it. But what do we do from a skilling paradigm? Is this time to really put kind of reskilling at parity as an important parameter? And third, which Alka ji also brought up in her conversation, is the fact that while we see supply chains being impacted, coming to a stall, women already being at the margins are likely to further be marginalized. We also have seen that one of the big disenablers of women coming back into the supply chain is also the social fallout of the current pandemic. We were speaking about domestic violence earlier. Well, it is true that at least in the first, the domestic violence in the lockdown across the globe, India has no isolation, has gone up by almost 30 to 40%. We also know the statistics that the NCW, the government itself, has put out, saying that there were about 257 or 300 odd cases just in the first 10 days of the lockdown. And there is also supporting data to say that the number of calls made by women to helplines have dropped, but the number of online applications have increased. So it also kind of speaks to what the home as a working space or a living space actually means to women, and the kind of security or insecurity that it brings them. So those things are going to be great. So as economic frustration sets or uncertainty looms in on households, with people cramped up, with near fear of death almost on your hand, we are also seeing a greater backlash on the socioeconomic well-being of the woman, at least on two big aspects. One on domestic violence, the other on women's burden of unpaid care work, because suddenly she's in a space where everybody is at home and the care of the entire household has now shifted upon to her. And we've not, of course, had the time to change culture and redistribute work. And while we keep talking of all of those things, we know that while dealing with that, we have not been able to even focus on these things. So from a supply chains perspective, I think we'll get to specific questions. But the top three things is, what would be the new economic normal? Would it be the same? Would it be different? Are there learnings in terms of supply chain models that are more sustainable nature that we may have accidentally found out that are worth scaling up? How do we ensure decent wage employment when women come back and actually safe spaces? And the fourth is, as employers or as those who are in touch with employers or represent a cohort of companies or that thinking, how do we also make employers responsible for ensuring safety and well-being, which is a very, very big driver to productivity? So these are some of the challenges that we've been toying in with the government, with civil society. We've been hearing data, we've been hearing anecdotal evidence. A lot of it is not promising, I must tell you, at this point in time, but I'm really glad that collectively, I think the model of collective wisdom has again emerged in the world. And so I'm very glad that there's a lot of collective wisdom in this virtual room that I'd like to hear from. So it's not really for me to speak any longer, but it's if I think the format of the discussion is that we start with Alka ji, hearing from you, maybe on the couple of insights that you have, or the things that we had discussed, and then I'll get into clear questions for each one of us.
So I should speak, Nishtha?
Yes, Alka ji, if that's you.
Yeah, okay. So basically, the government has been doing a lot of things, and as all of you know, it has started with, the SOP, which was issued by the Home Ministry, the do's and the don'ts. And after that, most of the our ministry has also issued, from the 20th, that when the MSMEs are opening up, what is the, kind of social distancing they have to maintain, that, trying to tell people. In fact, I'm working on a small movie, which we are hoping that we should be able to release in the next few days, that how, because we want to reach out to everybody, because MSME, we have a lot of people who are in the micro space, So the micro space needs a different kind of treatment from the small and the medium enterprises. And Jyoti, my request here today is that, when we are going to talk about, and all the, ladies who are here, that, we should look at the supply chain in different, ways, that, there are supply chain, which is, of very, very small units, where there are, just maybe 4 or 5 people working, or, we have, people with 20, 25 employees, and then they could be 100, and they could be in different spaces, where, these women are maybe sometimes doing work from home, sometimes they are, going to a place to, work for a few hours. So the supply chain needs to have a different treatment everywhere. What kind of treatment we give to an artisan or a, handloom worker will be very different from what we will be giving to a woman who's working on a laptop and, doing a back-end study or something. So we need to keep these things in mind. And when it comes to the ministry, we have been working on various, aspects, as you know, that, the 3%, which, was made mandatory when in the 25%, which is, as of now, it is not really making a difference, because all the MSMEs are in the same boat. The GEM portal also had a special provision for, doing the supply from the women, But these were things, which were in the past. Today, when we are talking about the supply chains, even from the government side, we really need to, have a relook at, what is happening. And since we are all here, and Jyoti can flag it later, that, all these discussions which are happening for the post-COVID world, we need to have an equal women representation, when we are talking and discussing, that what are the issues which need to be looked into. Because there are, as we all know, that, the graph is always skewed up. The companies which are there, if 48%, if nearly 70 to 80% MSMEs are owned by the men, this thing, and maybe it is like 20 or 21% which are owned by the women entrepreneurs. So we need to look into all these issues, because what happens is that sometimes the decision making, when it happens, we forget. And as I was mentioning earlier, that when we are talking about all the packages and all, we are talking about them as a sector. We are not really looking into that, we are talking about the women centric, or the, the entrepreneurs who are, from the marginalized or the backward community. So we've not been talking about all these things. So, we need to have a package inside a package, and that is where, I think such, thoughts and discussions will really help, because, once these notes come to us in the government, we can flag it. And I don't know if any of you have been looking, maybe Jyoti has been doing some work, we have been running a portal called Udyam Sakhi, where we were wanting that, the women should become the, one woman, if she, trains some 10 women, and becomes, like a role model. And it is like a chain kind of thing, which I think in this scenario, we can really activate it. And we could, even start putting, online courses, and, online tools could be really helpful at this moment, because, as, Nishtha had just mentioned that, we need to reinvent ourselves. In fact, everybody will need to reinvent ourselves, especially like in the government. We never thought, we could be doing meetings on, the web, because we were so used to the physical presence and looking at each other's faces all the time. But, we managed, and I think the 1 month which has, nobody meets anybody, but still work is going on. And I think we're doing just fine, So in the post-COVID world, how to reskill the women, and reskilling means, reskilling at every level, because a woman who's earning maybe, 100, 120 a day needs a different kind of skilling, Before MSME, I used to be working with the textile sector. And in the textile sector, what one noticed, there are a lot of work which comes from home, And so even like the best of the brands like Seva and all, they distribute the work, and the woman comes back after a month, a month or whatever time she needs to take for the embroidering the stuff, And some sectors will need a lot of care. And, this is where I think, all of you will have to pitch in, because each sector, there is a woman who's making, maybe they're going to the factories to make papad and pickles. There is another woman who's embroidering from home, and there is another woman who works in software. They're all, women in different kinds of supply chains, but, they will all need a different kind of treatment. That is where, and that is what interests me the most. And that is why I'm here myself, today, to hear all of you and to understand from you, how different supply chains will get a different kind of treatment. What is the expectation which all of you have from the government? Because, every minister is talking, like my minister, he's on an average every day meeting and talking to at least 4 to 5 associations, And we are all talking about, the quick benefits which the government can give. But we have to realign ourselves, to the next 6 months or later. Day after, I'm doing a live session on Facebook, with the SME forum, where I'm, planning to talk about, how the marketing scenario is going to change. And till now, we were supporting, like I look after the international domain, we were supporting, the companies to go abroad, participate in the fairs. But in the near future, no fairs are going to happen, no melas are going to happen. We need to develop a virtual market, and all the e-commerce platforms which are there, they are also, private platforms. So do we have the capability that, we start some kind of platforms, for the smaller, how do we go about it? Or do we get into these localized markets? How do the women groups come forward? Because ultimately, to get back to the real life, the production will start happening. But then again, it needs a platform to be sold upon, And whereas, we need to, mobilize, like FICCI has a presence in every state. We need to, Jyoti, get into the state chapters, Earlier also I had mentioned this, that, we need to talk to, because talking at the national level is one part, each state has a different flavor, a different story to tell, and the treatment is also, there are states where women are more progressive, they understand better. If you look at, you can't compare a Maharashtra to a UP or, to a Bihar, because, what kind of women force there is very different from what the women force is, So, such platforms, and FICCI having chapters in all the 6 states, we should come out, with a state-specific, detailing that, what we need to do, and how different supply chains, the women across, a woman who's, not educated, a woman who's, highly educated, working in a different kind of supply chain. This is my request, that we get into all these things. And I don't want to take much more time. I would request, and I'm here to listen to all of you so that we get something fruitful out of it. Thanks, and looking forward to listening to all of you.
Thank you, Alka ji. I just want to, for the benefit of everybody here, want to also state that, we will, as UN Women, be doing an analysis to the stimulus packages and the recommendations for the ministry from a women's enterprise perspective. If I'm right, I think Suhaila and I will be organizing a webinar with women entrepreneurs who are going to be fed, whose perspective will be fed into this study. And if there is anything specific that either of you would want us to look at, then I think we'd be very happy to include that in our study. So far, we're also looking at a large number of invisible women who really fall. Exactly. So there are stimulus packages introduced by the government for women, but for women and men, but these people really don't fall in terms of data on the radar of either the government or anywhere else. and that's a large mass of the invisible. So I think that's also going to be our focus. But before we really get to other things, Umaji, I'd like to come to you. As a first generation technocrat entrepreneur, I think your understanding on this would be far more sounder than mine. And my question to you is that, and we've seen this pushback really as UN Women from everybody we've spoken to, including governments, because when we reach out to a government, they're very ready to invest and get women back and train women back and get them into the supply chain. But what we're really facing as the industry is also shrinking consumer demand, restrictions on manufacturing, potential material shortages, and such things, because of which I think just investing in training and plowing back women into the supply chain is not just going to help. But there's also another side, the demand side, which a lot of us have not really been able to figure on how to work on. So in your opinion, what would be the immediate and long-term impact that companies can witness on their supply chain in terms of human resources and products and services?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me across on this panel. Nishtha, what you mentioned about a pause button, right? We really don't have much of a pause button. I would call it a disrupt. In a way, it's kind of a disruption. Like I go back to ground zero, and then I'm trying to get everybody. Yeah, I go back to ground zero, and then I start all over again. And that's exactly the feeling that I have right now as an entrepreneur, the way I wear my hat. It's been exactly a month and 3 days, and we haven't gone to the factory. And I know for sure that things are not going to be the same. And that's exactly what everybody has been talking in all management institutions over the years. Think out of the box, think of something which is, which you're going to do totally different. And that's something, think innovative is one, but think where there is 100% disruption, and then you actually evolve out with something new. And that's exactly kind of the situation that we are in. And if we are really going to look at it in a positive manner, that means we have to do and keep your team together in spite of the pandemic. So as much as I have been with all these virtual meetings, we've been trying to have meetings with our own staff, though we've never met physically in this entire 39 days. But I've been trying to talk to them and keep bringing up discussion back in terms of business. We all know that it's not going to be the same. There's going to be a huge amount of disturbance. Probably the next 1 week after the lockdown opens up and we start working, probably a week I'll have raw materials, I'll have materials in the factory for me to manufacture my transformers and coils to my supplier, to my customer. But there's going to come within a week, 10 days, that there is no raw material available for me to continue. So, and that's a fear that is there with me, but it's also there, I'm sure, with all my staff. It is very important that, and 90% of my staff are women. So I also made sure that during this 1 month, I've been in touch with them on a WhatsApp group, been in touch with my management staff and saying, okay, let's do this. Let's look at formats. We looked at different kinds of formats, but we've all working under a condition which is not very smooth. We've not had time to prepare ourselves. None of us in the manufacturing sector have ever thought of being able to work from home. I understand with the IT sector it has happened, but not so with the manufacturing sector. So what happens, they haven't got their systems in the house. Even if I did manage to move a computer system or a laptop, they don't have the exact bandwidth for them to work. They haven't had those kind of connections where they have a seamless connection for them to work. So there've been various kinds of issues for the first 2-3 weeks, and now we've settled down. But now that we're settling down, I'm also going to make sure that some of my staff are going to continue to work from home, which in a way would help with the social distancing, because it's not as if COVID-19 is just going to vanish after May 3rd. We're going to live with it for maybe a few months, hopefully not for more than a year, but it's there. And we all have to work with it. So it also gives us the opportunity to actually sit and rethink. And I've actually used this time to think, what else can I do? It's kind of like you're starting like a new startup. You actually start thinking and say, okay, now this has been my business. It's not going to be the same. I'm going to have probably 20% or 30% worst case scenario of my present business running, which also means that I have to look at other opportunities and business. And this given me the time to start thinking, explore something different, and also be able to connect with my staff and keep that motivation along. There's another point that I want to talk about on the same subject on supply chains is also with fellow entrepreneurs. I think we've never had that many meetings as we've had during this lockdown period. We've had many associations. So I'm also part of Emerge, the Women Entrepreneur Association. And we've had immense number of meetings. In fact, our meetings have been more regular now than it was then when it was physical, because many people couldn't attend. The attendance used to be poor. When they come, they will be busy on a phone call. But now you get like 1 hour or 1.5 hours of good focused attention. So a lot of new strategies for even associations to deliver more for its fellow entrepreneurs. Also given opportunity for entrepreneurs to share notes. Okay, what are you doing about it? Is this something that you can do? And an example that I would quote is the masks. Okay, so there's been huge demand for masks from GEM, from many other, corporate companies who have been asking for masks. And we know that a lot of these masks are being manufactured by these rural women entrepreneurs who have 2 machines, 4 machines at home. But there has been no linkage to the urban entrepreneurs and to the corporate. And these WhatsApp groups have actually helped promote it. That they've been able to discuss, they put up their photographs of their masks. They can make about 100 to 500 per day, which is again picked up by another entrepreneur, and then it is supplied to the corporate companies. So that kind of people changing, people who are manufacturing shirts and garments and apparel, women entrepreneurs in that, especially in the rural areas in Hubli, Dharwad, in these districts, and who manufacture bags, have suddenly moved over to manufacture masks and made use of this opportunity to supply and provide that supply chain. So there have been good connects. There have been women entrepreneurs who are into sanitizers, who were actually into personal hygiene products. But, sanitizer has suddenly become the new product, and they have many variants to it, one for the floor, one for personal use. So, and then also the certifications that come along that are needed for it. So I feel that COVID-19 has actually given us an opportunity to rethink, to, I being in the electronic sector, I feel that there's going to be huge opportunity going forward. We've heard China's gone, many companies, especially Japan, are planning to move out of China. It's definitely an opportunity, and I know Alkaji's ministry, MSME, is doing a lot. And I heard the Honorable Minister Nitin Gadkari also speak to us about the huge opportunity that is there for the electronic sector, and to invite a large number of these companies coming into India. Of course, Vietnam and Malaysia are all our competitors for it. So I would like to look at the positive side of it. It's not going to be easy. I know China is not going to just sit back and say, let all these companies go. I'm sure they're going to throw out many more subsidies and opportunities for people to stay back in China, because at the end of the day, price rules. But I would look at it positively and say, let's hope that this is a good time for us to rethink, come back stronger, and look at new opportunities. But we should also think of those few people who also can make use, just not the entrepreneurs who are in the urban areas, but also the entrepreneurs who are small and micro sector, who need a little bit more handholding. And I think that's where the associations like ours are there for, to be able to facilitate, to be able to support, and to be able to take it forward. I just wanted to flag just another point is that the finance minister came out with an excellent package for on PF for micro, small and medium enterprise, largely for MSMEs. But in Karnataka, of course, we couldn't use it much because because she said that 90% of the staff should be getting a salary less than 15,000, and our minimum wages in Karnataka is higher, and so many of the so-called entrepreneurs who are under ES and PF could not benefit out of it. But I think we are also largely leaving out a large section of entrepreneurs who employ only less than 9, who don't even come under ESI. And most women entrepreneurs enterprises are small. Most of them. If we really look at it, we are only 12% of the entire MSME that are women-owned enterprises. Out of that, most women enterprises employ less than 9. So
we are trying to flag this issue. Uma, sorry to interrupt you. We are trying to flag this issue, and my request is that after this, if we could just jot down the points, because every day after the ministers' meeting, I'm compiling, whichever association is saying whatever, and we are, shortly going to, send out letters to the finance minister and to the RBI governor as well as to the labor minister, which I'm already drafting for the minister. So, this issue has been discussed earlier, because, and that is why I have been stressing on this point that, we need to look at, when we talk about MSME, there are MSMEs, which could be worth, maybe 40, 50 crores. And there are, the micro units, which, as you are rightly saying, less than 5 people also. So they need a completely different treatment. Even, when the government, though I sit on the government side, when we're talking about paying the salary wages, a person who's employing 5 people, he or she might not have that kind of money to pay the April salary also. We all understand that, So we need to, flag these issues. And today, after this, Jyoti, my request is if you can give me these pointers by tomorrow, because day after I have a meeting with the minister where I can, put up these issues, specifically for the women, supply chains and the women entrepreneurs. Please carry on. Sorry.
Sure. So actually, I just wanted to close with this, that I felt that there was a large section of women entrepreneurs who are very small, micro entrepreneurs who employ less than 10, less than more or less 5, and leaving out the self-made entrepreneurs or, the entrepreneurs who are self-employed. So we have this huge section, and I think that the government really needs to look at some kind of...
I have one more question. This is, because I've been reading a lot on, various articles are coming, where, it's talking about the emotional and the mental health of the entrepreneurs, So how do you think, and the people who are working with the entrepreneurs, because most of them, many of them, have been, at this thing that, most people are, as of now, really worried about paying salaries, how they'll sustain themselves. And is it, like day before, a lady called me up, she's, into the handicraft sector, and she employs 150 women. She's saying, I'm so anxious that I can't sleep. Like I can only talk to them, or, and very rightly said, we sit on chairs, we make policies, but, I'm not an entrepreneur myself. So, these are, yes, things, which people who are sitting on the other side, she says that, since COVID-19 started, she doesn't sleep the nights. So, this is also...
And these are issues. And so, in fact, most of our meetings in Emerge are also on these kind of issues. And many of these entrepreneurs have come up with this. And we do say that the packages that are coming out from the government, it's a 1-month lockdown that we've had. Let's say that the working capital comes for you for the next 3 months and you're able to pay up your salaries, and let's hope for the best. And, that kind of positive push and giving them kind of a support gives them that feeling, okay, she can do it, maybe I can do it. That kind of feeling. It's not that I can do it either. April was okay, we could pay off the salaries. We know that May is going to be difficult, and everybody knows that. So I think there is going to be some kind of a trade-off, or 50% of the salary. Is there something that we can manage? But we still don't know what the package is going to come from the government. We're all hoping that there's something that can come as a support mechanism, but we have no idea.
We are also, trying our best, listening every day to at least 4 or 5 associations, trying to, but,
in fact, I was just before this in a meeting with the district associations with FICCI, and we were having the same kind of discussion, and whatever the size of the company, everybody is worried about it. But then it's important that we share a positive note about it, because I think we're all resilient. We can come out of it, and we hope to come out of it, but it's going to be difficult. It's not going to be easy, but we need to do that. And I think resilience is the key.
We need to maintain a lot of positivity.
That's so. Thank you, Nishita.
Thank you, Umaji. I think that was very, very insightful. I think even from my own experience of having spoken to a large number of women, the concern is that very, very micro enterprises with less than 9 people are extremely worried because they're completely cash strapped by now. And also some of the regulations that they're hearing about 50% of staff coming back, for them doesn't really change anything, because 50% of this staff is not even good enough to restart production in so many ways. So I think, and because there are a large number of enterprises or women-owned enterprises that fall into that section, I think what I have seen is for some nuanced thinking from policymakers to distinguish between blanket rules on how the economy will come back, to also ensure that it is relevant and enough for some people to actually restart business and come back. But yes, that's point is noted. Ma'am, we'll get the minutes to you, Alka ji, so that you're well briefed in your meeting with the minister tomorrow. I'd now like to bring Suhasini, a good friend, Suhasini Singh, country manager, Fairwear Foundation. Suhasini's work around addressing labor rights issues in the garment supply chain is well known. Issues of young workers, gender-based violence, and migrations have been core to her areas of work. Suhasini, I think the garment sector has typically come as a part of a conversation, naturally emerged in any conversation we are having around women, because there are just so many women in that sector. And we see that from the conversations we've had with the states, where the sector is a large contributor to state GDP, we've seen that it has taken a huge hit in terms of both demand and supply. From your body of work, what do you think are the steps that brands and factories can take up to protect the interest of the workers? And are you hearing the same kind of situation, or are we missing out on something very insightful that might be important to policymakers, or even for that matter, bilateral, multilateral agencies on businesses, as we are trying to come back to life? Suhasini, are you there?
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. My namaste to everyone again. I was on mute and talking, so my apologies. Yes, I've been working in the garment sector since 13, 14 years now. And with this pandemic, when there's been the industry of late was going through some losses, and brands shifting to Bangladesh, China, and now newer geographical areas like Ethiopia are moving towards Africa. So that was kind of a threat for the Indian business. But now with the pandemic, it has taken a severe toll on the business, one, but the brunt is borne mostly by the workers, which is almost 60% of these workers are women globally. And in India, it accounts to almost 70%, because in Bangalore, it's almost 90% women workforce entirely, and Delhi and Tirupur, which forms the main clusters of garment industry. Tirupur has over 60% again, and Delhi is 45-50% of women workers, especially. Now with the businesses, because of the lockdown, all workers were, even the government announced that you have to send workers on paid leave and don't cut the wages. You have to pay them you have to pay full wages to them. The businesses from Europe and America started cutting orders or postponing orders, which was, no one was prepared for it. The businesses definitely not, and they thought once the lockdown is over, they would resume the business. But with the brands canceling the orders on them, it hit them really hard. So there's no payment. There was deferment. Payments were deferred as well. saying we'll pay after 3 months or 4 months. The shipments were not taken by the brands. I'm trying to lay out the scenario on how the businesses have been affected and therefore the workers. And in the garment industry, it works. So the payment is made only when the shipment goes. So since the shipments have been stalled, the payments have been stalled, and the businesses here in India also have not received payment therefore. Now, coming to the workers, the most badly affected are the ones working on temporary and contractual work or piece rate work with no identity, no ID card, no contract appointment letter given to them. And unfortunately, it's women mostly who did not care to have or ask for employment contract or have anything signed. So that makes it even more vulnerable, brings them in an even more vulnerable position where it comes to loss of job. Now, as a civil society, we are asking our brands to not cancel the orders on the factories. It can be worked out as in you can postpone the orders, but not cancel it, make the payments on time, don't defer it, because we want the workers to be paid. Here, and bear in mind that most of the workers are also intra-migrant workers and interstate migrant workers, intrastate and interstate migrant workers. So the position of such migrant workers are even more stark, because those who could go back home on time, they could, but many of them have been stuck in places of work. Now the factories are closed, they have no job, they have no income, therefore. They cannot go back home because the transports are all, no transport is running now. And that they are stuck, and basically since I think 10 days into the lockdown, it has become more of a survival issue for these workers. Now their condition, because they were all paid minimum wage or barely minimum wage in some cases, their situation was anyway hand to mouth on day-to-day lives, where basically making the ends meet. Now with the loss of job and loss of income, they are at the mercy of these relief work that some of our local NGO on the ground are doing. Distributing food materials and protective equipments. So this is even more telling on the fact that despite the announcement of the free ration distribution by the government, but these workers, especially the migrant workers, have not been the beneficiaries of such of such measures, because the ration card, the ration dealers are asking for ration card or any kind of proof, which these migrant workers do not have, or at least they do not have at that moment. So the situation of migrant workers, women migrant workers, are even more worse. I'm saying because we have been working with these organizations, giving out food. So that is the immediate effect of this lockdown and the pandemic on the workers. And once the survival, if we move away from the survival issue of these workers, the long-term or medium-term solution, in my thought, would be that we have to talk to the brands that it cannot be business as usual. And in your opening remark, Nishtha, you said about this graffiti in Hong Kong. It cannot be, the business cannot be run as usual, because that was the cause of the problem. Same is the thing with the garment industry, because everything is on such a wafer thin margin. The businesses are run on a wafer thin margin, which does not allow the factory owners to give a decent pay or decent wage to the workers, which does not, therefore it doesn't lead to any kind of saving at the workers' end, and any emergency situation or any accident or sickness in the family, leave alone the pandemic, leaves them in debt. Now this situation, the pandemic has only amplified the whole issue in this industry. And what we are asking our brands, I think I'm jumping the gun here, but we are asking our brands to not cancel orders, be in constant communication with the factory owners, give the confidence that the business will come back slowly but surely to them, and also to consolidate their supply chain, because the longer the tail is, the more marginalized these workers become. So these are some of the situations that I am involved in, right from the worker side and also from the brand's perspective.
Thanks, thanks, Suhasini. I think that was very telling, and I think kind of reiterated some of the things that we've really heard from the ground. Are the two things that I definitely like to pick up. I think, Alkaji, for a conversation tomorrow or whenever we can, from a problem-solving perspective, is some of the fear in those of us working on the sector is also to see whether certain sectors are going to see, whether certain sectors might ever see the light at the end of the tunnel. Particularly, will this be, if we don't make it intentional, will this be the loss of India's creative economy purely because wafer thin margins, even in good times, and the fact that decent wages have not been able to be paid, and global businesses are also not able to provide the kind of reassurance of seeing business back. I do want to tell everybody that we also have a set of questions from our audiences here. So I'm going to pick up those which are relevant. And I think one of the questions, ma'am, Alkaji, that has come up in relation to the conversation that we've just been having is how do companies which deal with international logistics and courier companies resume business? Will there be government relief for businesses that have that international link? Because that is probably the last link to come back live in this situation. And we can then talk about that towards the end when we hear from you. But thank you, Suhasini, again, wonderful work. I really hope that the textile sector is an important sector in the context of India. And as you said, the new normal has to be different. And I think from those who are yet to hear or those we've already spoken to, I think it'd be interesting to also hear a perspective on what the new normal could be. Has COVID-19 given us lessons on work models, distribution models that are cost effective, that are more sustainable, and were probably the first choice, like for example, the work from home model for a lot of women in the sector. So thank you for that. Thank you for that quick update. Now I'm going to come to Ms. Chetna Sinha, who needs no introduction, but just for formality, I will of course take you through some of the work that she has done, which is never justice to her introduction. The founder and chairperson of the Deshi Bank, also a banker and the woman who started India's first rural women bank. She also started India's first business school for rural women entrepreneurs, is an Indian social activist working to empower women in drought-prone areas of rural India by teaching entrepreneurial skills, access to land, and means of production. Chetna ji, you have had tremendous experience of working with women in stressed situations, maybe as stressed as these or more stressed than these, but similar comparable situations. What we've really been seeing in smaller enterprises as a big problem is the drying up of cash. And in a lot of conversations that we've had with, at least that I've had with women, we've seen them say that they were just about coming to the same cash convenience as they were before demonetization when COVID-19 happened. And so this is probably not just the impact of COVID-19, but is a compounded series of events that has really dried up cash in the supply chains. What do you see as the impact on smaller businesses, also on MFIs, and how do you think some of them can be addressed? What I would love to also hear from you is any innovative model or solution or trick or tactic that has come up in these days, because sometimes the worst times do spur a lot of innovation. And I think it is for us to notice and acknowledge them and make sure that they're a part of our coming back to life. So Chetna ji, I'd love to hear from you.
Thanks, Nishtha. Thanks for this panel. I would just like to share that, what actually, how we have been able to cope up with this as a bank. But before coming to that, I would just like to say that we are operating in the state, Maharashtra, where you have a number of cases are huge. It's like around 35% of COVID-19 of India is in Maharashtra. And in that situation, when you're working with women entrepreneurs on one side, and when with the lockdown where everything is closed, you have women like, their businesses are there. She's on the street and she says like, what do I do? So anyway, she was working with a small margin, but now she has the perishable goods, which tomorrow it's of no use. And how would she stand up? So I do think that when you and very small margin, not only just they are in informal they are low waste who are street vendors and all. And when you are providing the banking facility to them, so on the other side, the bank also has a lot of challenges that is my loan going to be repaid in time? How am I going to do that? How am I going to control my NPAs and all? So when I was listening Alka ji, that, about the whole small entrepreneurship and all, I was just thinking that there's so many other issues where this ministry can suggest to RBI, and which you already must have been doing, that how can we, create more working capital loans for that. But before coming to that, I would just say that, when this happened and when we saw that majority of our women may just not only next day they may have an issue of food, but it will be for them maybe a last chance now, and will they survive? So with this, when, on one side, of course, we were clear that till June, they don't have to pay installment. But then at the same time, when you are doing lending, yes, but bank is not going to survive if bank does not do lending, right? It's not at present as a banker, recovery is not bothering me so much, but the next lending is bothering me much. Yeah. And so then we thought that, okay, we can think of the recovery later, but how do we bring those businesses, their businesses, and so that we can lend them more? Now, when I say that, what the first thing we did is, and when I say that in Maharashtra, when the pandemic is highest in the country, the first thing we saw was the reverse migration of the population, which is all over India. But in Maharashtra, like in city like Nashik, Pune, Latur, we have branches there, and all the migrants were there. And so many of our women who were in catering business had lost the job. So the immediate thing what we did with our client was that we told them that we are making a provision of immediately 6 crore of loans to be given to those women who are catering business. So what we will do is that provide them the working capital loan, but at the same time provide them the other infrastructure, where we are talking about the supply chain. So what are the other infrastructure is that they will get order for dabbas. So one woman will get at least 200 orders of 200 lunch boxes. And if she gets that, and which Monday she made sure through it business school that they get the order, and then immediately transferred the working capital loan, which can be 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 according to their need, and they do not have to the bank. So I'm just like to say that I'm so proud that in rural India also women are doing mobile banking, and they are doing it, getting it that on their mobile. And digitalization is like, from every level, right? So on the bank side, we are digitized, but at the other side is that if these women are going to make this huge business, they need a packaging machinery, very small, but they need it. And we made sure that they get a working capital for that. They get the machinery for that, because we already, fortunately, this whole year, we did the exhibitions for these women on the machinery. Because in this sector, I always see that women who are employing less than 9 people, what are their businesses? Whatever their businesses are, either they must be in textile or they must be in catering business. but they don't have enough technology, or their machineries are second-hand machineries. So whole year we were doing that. We did the exhibitions of machineries so that women can buy these machineries. And fortunately, because we were in touch with those vendors, and because we were also making food for police department. So whole in Pune, the food which is provided to the police who are on the duty is provided by our women who are doing in the catering business. So what we did is that we got that order, gave that business to our women. With that, we provided the working capital immediately. And at the same time, wherever machinery is required, we did this. Why I'm narrating this whole is that while doing that, everything was done virtually. I would like to share that we have a virtual of going to boxes. How are you lunch boxes? How are you going to maintain the hygiene of that? All these things were halfway on digitizing all our modules also. Better India is a partner. Accenture is a partner. So Accenture actually helped us do that. And with that, because unless you have these such partners who have a macro vision and macro resources also, right? And with that, and I do want to emphasize that whatever in any sector you are doing, ease of getting money has to be there. I mean, when I say that, ease of business is ease of banking and ease of getting working capital. And also immediately we took the decision, and I'm glad that today, every day, nearly more than some 50,000 boxes, lunch boxes are made at one time by our women, which are distributed to the migrant workers and police, where they are doing the duty. And we are working with the government hand to hand. And this is all, it is a business model. So there is no grant here. Here, bank is providing the loan, business school is creating the platform where we procure everything. Women will get at their doorstep, they make the lunch boxes, and the van will come and take up. In the similar way, we have done with the mask also. I heard that, you all were talking about the mask, but many of our women who were in the business of uniforms, they were making uniforms for the children in the school. Now schools are shut down, they are going to lose the business. So immediately we said that we'll make a virtual module of how to make masks. And some of our, because we have branch in Pune, many industry had already ordered us masks in last week of February. And one of the case in Pune was on 2nd March. So the Pune industry was quite prepared that we will need, it's not the health industry, but otherwise also we will need the mask. So the first order we got of mask was 500,000. And actually we didn't have a unit of mask. What we did is that we, through our chambers of commerce, we actually on our Facebook, we said that, Mandeshi's Facebook, that this is the order has come. Those who are in uniform business, you all can contact us and we can train them, these women, how to make masks, because they know basic knowledge. And I'm so proud to say that today we have 300 women making masks in 9 districts. Every day more than 100,000 masks are being produced and dispatched. And in that also, when we got this order, what we had to do is that give the cutting machine, number one, make the arrangement of packing and make the arrangement of transport. And all this, because it was mask, it was of course easy, that government also gave us, because you have to everywhere. And the crucial part was provide them working capital to do this. And this was done immediately through our digital banking. And we were already sending SMS. We have already sent SMS to all our women entrepreneurs. And we have more than 110,000 women who have taken loan from Mandeshi. And every year around 70,000 women take loan. So we have that data on one side. So that was like immediately how we created the supply chain. But I also would like to say on the policy making part, and I do totally agree that, these women, and now that it is the right time, I mean, whole year our women are going to make masks. And women, those who are got in the catering also, catering business. Now, I mean, they can started taking order for the industry also, because workers who are going to come now, partially going to start their businesses, these women can give the lunch boxes there also. So while sharing this on the ground reality, another thing I want to actually share with you, this is not about the supply chain, but even on the humanitarian ground, how are we going to operate? So what Mandishi Bank did is, when direct benefit transfer, Alkaji, when it was declared, the first thing we did is that we coordinated with the postal bank, because our areas in Nashik are women, there are tribal areas, and the bank is 50 kilometers from there. Even if the money is transferred in their account, they will not get it 500 rupees. So what we did is that we contacted the postal department, gave them data, and in those tribal areas, all these women could get it money through postmen. And what I'm trying to say by this narrating the example is that now time has come, we will have to coordinate with the various departments. So Mandishi Bank is also coordinating with the postal bank, so that whatever government DBT is happening, maybe postal bank may not be able to reach it, but we can help them to reach it. And so, because you have data, all Aadhaar linked is there, in the similar way, I do think that how do we, we were talking about Udyam Sakhi and all, and Alkaji, we have this Udyam Aadhaar. So all those portals can be updated, can we have on those, sorry?
Ma'am, I'll have a one-to-one chat with you. I'll speak to you. Yeah. So you can help us in doing a lot of things, So I'll speak to you separately, on each and every issue, and then we can make the model much bigger, and we can replicate your success story to other states, ma'am.
So sure, that's what actually this mask thing. We were also, I'm already talking with the Women Entrepreneurship Cell at Niti Aayog also, and we are part of those network also. So these are the way, and I do think that now, in a way, this is a crisis we are operating, and I do think that the next world, the world will change. Opportunity for the small business, that how do you build those whole sector. Why I'm saying sector is that what did I learn from this, from our women actually. Women who was making uniform, she is ready to change her business immediately with 2 days and making mask, right? Yes. So she's ready. How much are we ready to change our business model? And that was a learning for us. So then we thought that, we have to, okay, we will build the sector. We will focus on mask and hand gloves. And whatever ecosystem is required, we'll give it. And create those platforms so that these women sitting at home also can produce, and that whole mindset that if I have, and another thing which I learned was that if I am at home, but I don't need a big unit to produce 100,000 masks or 100,000 gloves. Even women, 300 women sitting at home also can do it. That confidence, I have got it, or our women have got it, right? With the virtual support. So I do think that in this time, we are learning a lot. We may not need those concentrated, huge, expensive infrastructure, and we can meet those demands.
Exactly, ma'am. That is what in the ministry we are also working on the model that, now that we will not be able to send people to these, no longer the melas will happen, no longer international, this thing. So we need to make a virtual model and help people to, because sooner or later the production will become okay. People will start producing new things, and we need to find them markets, how to sell them, how to, reinvent themselves. So, I'll take your number and we'll have a separate chat, ma'am, one-to-one. So,
yeah, thank you. And I would just now like to just end my comments with this, that it was such a, because this is the time of harvest, and everywhere there is a harvest is there, wheat, kharif, because this year, fortunately, kharif was such a good, we had a very good kharif crop. And so immediately what we did is, we have warehouse, so we designed the receipt financing so that farmers can immediately park their produce and get the loan, so that they will prepare for the Rabi. And I just want to say that I'm so proud that our women actually are taking mortgage. Not only generally people mortgage gold and take loan, right? But our farmer women are also mortgaging their food grains and taking loan and preparing themselves for the next season. What I'm saying is that they are smart, they are changing, they are using digital phone. Thing is that we need to be much more smarter. We will have to be more tech savvy. They don't have to unlearn anything. We have to unlearn from computers to laptops and now to digital phone, but they are very smart with the digital phone. So I do think that this can be an opportunity, and this opportunity can really, I always say that our women always say that, whenever I talk about, we talk to them that situation is so bad and how are you going to survive? And they say, no, we have a courage for that. You just give us capital. So I would just say that they say that our courage is the capital, and I always say that their courage is capital for us also. And let us, all of us, actually with that courage, if we create the capital for them, I am sure that we'll be able to have reinvent our industry, which will empower our women entrepreneurs a lot.
Thank you, Chetna ji. You never cease to amaze. You
Chetna,
never,
as Alka mentioned, right? You can say Chetna because it becomes very.
Well, after all that body of work, it becomes very difficult for me to not say the G. But you never cease to amaze. You never cease to inspire. I must say, I think the 2-3 things that really came out from this conversation is the ease of accessing capital, because we've seen that as the greatest barrier. Though we've seen large-scale announcements from the government, a very good example that came to us was from the Alliance of Construction Workers, where a large scale of a large package was announced. But just in the city of Delhi, while there are estimated 31 lakh people, only 13,000 are registered workers. So where are we really talking about reflecting these people? And even if, let's say, there is a CBT, and if the bank is about 50 kilometers, how do women line up? And again, in these, are we also contradicting the very principles of social and physical distancing while pushing these? Is something that we need to be cognizant of. Again, a wonderful example, Chetna ji. We'll of course take the example of the online tool far and wide. I'm sure this webinar is already a success because Alka ji has asked for your number and has agreed to take this forward in the extent that it is possible. But that's really the kind of collaboration that we were hoping would happen from this webinar. But definitely ease of capital, and one important point, which is very basic but very obvious, is do we need the kind of infrastructure that we thought we needed to produce what we are producing? So has this revealed that there is a more latent but a more potent model of work, and should we be all taking notes and making sure that it is a part of our new next normal and new reality? But also, ma'am, though, the other point that you brought up is courage being the capital of women, and I think that's a very morale boosting point, because we've also got a lot of comments on YouTube, because I believe the discussion is live on YouTube. And Alka ji, a lot of that points is really on mental health support that people need that people with small businesses need at this point in time, and the kind of hand holding and optimism that they need to see from each one of us. But very important points, Chetna ji. We will document some of these and send them for larger circulation. But the one thing that I'm also going to throw as a point from yours to everybody else is this also happens to be that time of great institutional collaboration. I think so far we could have afforded to kind of work in silos and do our best and shine our light. But what has now become completely unaffordable is to shine that light just within ourselves or by ourselves. And I think this is the fact that you're saying that Mandeshi is talking to the postal bank, is talking to someone else, creating that kind of web is as a strategy is definitely working. And I think I want all of us to take account as solutions, is institute greater intentional collaborations and solutions. And of course, the last link of life coming back is how do we create markets that are now going to be virtual and not physical, which also happen to be lower on cost, environmentally friendly, and more sustainable. So I do believe that the world has given us a model to look at that we must all look at intentionally. It takes me to my next speaker, Ms. Preeti Dmello, Chair, Subgroup on Gender Parity, FICCI Task Force on D&I, Head Diversity and Lead Academy, TCS. Preeti is also the co-founder of Conscious Development, a leadership development firm. She's been responsible for devising and implementing a strategy to embed new behaviors and understanding of diversity as a business imperative, leading a team of 40. As a part of her work, she has also established and led a Mumbai Center of Excellence of Coach Leadership Development Academy lead, and has established large-scale development programs, including an accelerator program for women leaders. Preeti, to bring you in, so far we've heard the government perspective, we've heard the perspective from the ground, we heard an entrepreneur, and here you represent a cohort of companies and a very important issue for the cohort of companies, which is diversity and gender parity. Sometimes right now when when we also happen to have our own business sector advisory council, and when we happen to talk to some of these businesses, while all of them do open up to the gender issue, the one very silent and sophisticated pushback that we get on gender or center staging women is the fact that, well, there are more important issues at play. We are talking about life and death. And I think there's a constant initiative or attempt by UN Women to always help the other understand on how if women are center stage, and if we always use the clustered approach of thinking that women have now mastered, all the community building that women have mastered, we might just come back sooner and much more resilient. But I'd like you to shed some light on what are companies thinking and how much are the vulnerable workers like women in supply chains or people who don't appear on their roles. We're also seeing a new kind of economy emerge, the gig economy, where not too many people actually reflect as employer responsibility. So how in this context do you really see employers respond on these issues?
Thanks, Nishtha. That's a good question. As you rightly said, my context is very, very different. I have deep empathy and I would say limited understanding of all the other contexts, and I want to be able to openly bear that, because it allows me to then explore the idea of what is happening at my end and what more can we bring. I think one of the things that completely inspires and amazes me is this whole idea of supply chain. To really say that while there is a defined traditional definition, it's also important for us to understand that most workplaces that have any product or service come under the ambit of supply chain. And this could be small, large-scale industries, these could be corporations and products and services, basically all spaces where there is a network between a company and its suppliers and there's a customer. And the reason I bring this out is to say that potentially we also need to start expanding our own lens around this idea. So my belief is that organizations need to be extremely intentional. I think you said that, or somebody else did, very, very intentional about how we work through this time. And how do we work with our marginalized communities? How do we work with those who are more vulnerable in these times and otherwise? And I want to build a little bit of context before I get into some thoughts and solutions. One is for us to recognize that women wear multiple hats, and there are a lot of women on this call, so we potentially know that. We fulfill many roles, and thus this is not the new normal for most of us. The differentiator, however, is that we are now interacting and engaging with a stressed ecosystem and others who are stressed and their related stresses. So we're talking to women who are potentially already stretched. And there's hypercomplexity in the system, there's hypercomplexity within our own lives. That's one. The other is that we cannot ignore that while women as a collective have been coming together now for a while, our ecosystems and our cultures that surround us have been developing at a pace that is slower than ours. The pace hasn't been quite the same. And we've relied far too long on the ingenious nature of women to get past the situation. Yeah. So we need some really sturdy ground to stand on. Which is to say that this has created a scenario that is way beyond a woman's capacity to work through the complexity, and is certainly not only dependent on skill. And I think there needs to be greater marriage. Okay, I've unmuted myself again. I think there's somebody else. So potentially a greater intimacy and marriage of the idea of who women are and how they operate and how they're supported. So coming to the idea of active support, I'd break this down into 4 pieces. And I'd say one is that we as women need to recognize that nobody is coming to save us. This life of ours is 100% our responsibility. And the one thing that I say to us as women within my own ecosystem is we have to get a grip on it. We have to be able to go out and get the support we need, which is why listening to Alka and listening to, sorry, I'm forgetting the name. Yes, it has been so encouraging because it immediately brings forth the idea that, if Chetna ji can actually pull together support for 10,000 women, what if we were to just try and start supporting just a handful, and what will the difference that would possibly make? My sense is that this hyper complexity in our life as women has created fragility, but our roles have become more complex, which falls upon the system to engage with us differently. So when I speak to leaders, I would say that start seeing yourself as a part of the system. See the interdependency in what's happening to women and what's happening to others as a result. So the long story short of that is that as we empower women, we are empowering everybody around us. And to create greater awareness around that, I think at a very deep, potentially dull level, people know, but do we actively practice it? I'm not so sure. And the invitation is to do that. Simultaneously, like Chetna ji said, ask women what they need. In asking them what they need, we are being able to give them the support they exactly or specifically want. And it's a matter of, more than parity. I've been saying this at FICCI as well. I prefer the idea of equity, because you're moving from the idea of equality to saying what is right in the situation, which potentially encompasses the idea of equality as well. And the only way to do this is to respond with action, because good thoughts, good ideas have gone on too long. Let's do something with it. Which is to say, how do we mobilize capacity building? Our ability to deal with stressors, mental health, emotional resilience, awareness around POSH, or what we call prevention of sexual harassment, domestic violence. Is distressing to see what's happening around the country right now. Human rights issues around women, and so on and so forth. And on a capability level, I would say reskill. It has to be ongoing, and reskill and make contemporary to as much of an extent we possibly can. And finally, to that point, I would say that we also need to ensure that there's sufficient and more representation of women in health and safety committees or other bodies at all levels that define measures to protect workers from COVID-19. This is at the corporate level, at the government level, at not-for-profit, so on and so forth. I'm also beginning to feel rather concerned about the protection of pregnant women workers during this crisis, and I'm hearing of some stories that need attention. To bring in also the idea of providing health access to health services and not limited only to COVID-19. What are the other possibilities of health services that are required at this point in time, and are we being able to provide our women? So sanitary pads, for instance, that came up, Alka ji brought up in the beginning. It's a basic requirement. Are we being able to support, especially in places where we'd made some movement and moved from fabric to sanitary pads? What's happening there? And bring in the entire range of services for women, from physical health to mental health to emotional health, and moving on to financial health. So the networks to that support vulnerability in self and others is another one that I'd bring in. It's a South African idea of Ubuntu, which is to say, can we actually understand that I am because we are? Again, the bigger idea of interdependency. So the long and short of what I'm really saying is that one of the defining features of any organization that will help it survive and thrive in this point of time is through an equitable and fair workplace. And that is what will create the anti-fragile or drive both innovation and resilience, as Umaji was saying earlier.
Preeti, to add on to what you're saying, and Jyoti, we need to flag this somewhere, you know, that many of the working places, why talk about, you know, these small, small enterprises, most of the, you know, the good places also just have one women's toilet, you know. This is something we all need to, you know, push, you know, wherever we are talking about, you know, when we talk about equality, we talk about gender parity and all the other issues, you know, the basic requirements like, you know, a women's toilet is, you know, the last of the priority which is given to any place, you know, that, you know, when they think about it, there will be a washroom for the men, but there will be just one loo, you know, which maybe, you know, all the women have to just go and use it. So, you know, these things are very basic things, you know. So today, since we are all talking as women, you know, it's neither that, you know, I'm sitting as a joint secretary or, you know, Preeti sitting, you know, in some capacity, or, you know, Nishtha is sitting from there. You know, we need to, you know, bring these things, because from the government side also, a lot of things are being looked at, you know, with new eyes, you know. And you know, everybody's talking about things, you know, and we are all, you know, meeting in such, you know, Zoom meetings or which meetings. And as someone earlier mentioned that, you know, we've never had so many meetings, you know, and people used to come, you know, kabhi koi late hai, kabhi kuch hai, but, you know, these are all very focused meetings. And I think we should come out with good results, because like talking about sanitary napkins, you know, for the past few years, wherever I've been posted, I've been working on this. And it started from the Northeast when I came to know somebody was using straw. And I just, you know, actually literally fainted that, you know, I could never think that how can anybody use something like straw, you know, during such a vulnerable period. So you know, these are, you know, and as women, it's, you know, if we can make any difference, we all need to push it together. Forums, whatever, you know, whatever space we have, because, you know, menstrual health is again a very, it's a subject which has been taboo, you know, for a very, very long time. People still don't talk about it. Many of the, you know, societies and many households, you know, the best of the households still don't discuss all these things, you know. We're diverting from the topic, but yes, you know, it needs to be, you know.
Right. And it potentially maybe not diverting, Alka, from the topic, because it's still talking to the greater whole. You know, safety of women, safety of girls, their basic needs and health. It's coming together of that will create the new reality. Because
Exactly.
if we continue to ignore it, we're not changing anything. And the whole idea now is, I think it was Nishtha who said it in the beginning, is that there is no new normal. The new normal is a whole disrupted state. We have to craft the new normal. But I don't want us to be in a position where we are going back a couple of, you know, tens of years and saying, now let's restart the journey. I think there's a way for us to be able to come together collectively with, you know, we are sharp, smart women from across the country on this call, to say, how do we put our heads together and what do we do? Basic stuff that we can do to create a shift and change.
Thank you, Preeti. I'm going to come back to all of you for one last question before I go to the last speaker. Ms. Megha Chawla, who's a partner in Bain and Company. Megha is a partner in the company, is a member of Bain's technology, media and telecom practices in India, and a product leader at Bain's global capability sourcing practice. Megha, in good times, Bain had launched a report on women's entrepreneurship in India that had identified several opportunity areas to unlock the potential of women entrepreneurs. What would you think are the 3 key takeaways for women entrepreneurs at this time of crisis, and where do you think that opportunity lies in the new normal, if I may say? You probably need to unmute yourself. No, I can't. I still can't hear you.
No, we can't hear you.
Nope. No. No, very faintly. Like, I know that you're saying something, but I can't hear you loud and clear. Do you want to move closer to either your computer, or if you're on a phone, or?
Okay, is it slightly better?
Yeah.
Okay. It's a slightly unresponsive computer, but let me know if you lose me again. It was wonderful hearing everybody's thoughts. And earlier this year, it seems long back, but it was really just 2 months back that we wrote the report on women and entrepreneurship in India. Chetna ji was an advisor, and it was, I've had the pleasure of knowing her for about a year, and very, very inspired. Now, it was a little bit of a blow because, we had started down this mission of looking at women and entrepreneurship, and COVID came and everything else became about COVID, which is important, it's critical. But at the same time, one of the worst unintended outcomes of such crises is that all other causes take a hit, and people who are already vulnerable, in this case, women entrepreneurs, but many other such groups tend to get more impacted, doubly impacted. Now, coming back to what are some actions? I'd like to just take a step back and cite some very optimistic research. Most countries that have seen a change in participation and contribution, and I'm not just saying like, passive participation, but real contribution of women in the economic sphere have achieved that in times of crises. Whether it's war, whether it's pandemics, that's where the role of women has actually changed materially. Now, I wonder if that is the opportunity. This is the opportunity for India. In many ways, in different forms, people mention that this is the time to zero base, right? It's the time to actually relook at things and say what should be different. And I do believe that it's, in many ways, it's time for nation building, right? This is the first time that everybody has been impacted. Obviously, some have been more impacted than the others, but I think there is a shared sense of distress and urgency that the nation feels. And I believe the role of women needs to be changed from the point of view of, and be looked at from the vantage point of nation building. And I believe at the top-down level, that is what is critical, right? To create. We'll talk about what entrepreneurs need to do and what different agencies from the government need to do. But at the highest level, I think we need to think about, and this has to be, we like it or not, sponsored by championed by the government, that the role of women is seen as integral to rebuilding the country, rebuilding the economy. And unless that is done, women will continue to take the larger hit of it, and that's not the need of the hour. The need of the hour is that everybody comes in with their faculties, however big or small that they may be. Whether you're a highly qualified, technologist, or you are a semi-skilled but highly agile and responsive uniform maker, the time is now for everybody to come in and work towards rebuilding. Now, very specifically for women entrepreneurs, right? I believe that, look, in some ways, a lot of what I'm suggesting has been corroborated by the examples that Chetna ji and others shared, right? The first and foremost is that, look, women are emotionally more resilient. They are emotionally stronger. And this crisis gives them a double whammy. It hits them harder. So I think the most important thing is to actually, use that resilience to focus on how they will come out of it, right? There's a quote that says, when fishermen cannot go to sea, they repair their nets. And this is that time to say, okay, for those who have the luxury to, how do you actually rethink the model at this point? Things are changing, dynamics are changing, the sectors of focus are changing. For the first time, as I'm the 10th person saying this on this webinar, but for the first time, the rules of the game don't require one to be out in the remotest of areas. Today, everybody in some ways is on a slightly equal footing in terms of access, in terms of being able to be out there. Now, if you have the luxury to, which I admit a lot of women don't, but those who have the luxury to rethink, to replan, to re-strategize for themselves, this is the time for it. The second one I would say is, unfortunately, and I think all of us to some extent face this, many of us are very privileged, so we don't face it to that extent, but all of us are seeing how the pandemic impacts us more at home. Our domestic responsibilities just increase, right? We like it or not, right? Like we may have the most supportive family, there's still a little more that hits women. Now, in that time, as Preeti said, no one's going to come out and save us, right? How do you actually use this time to continue to, it's very easy to forget about investing in networks, investing in meeting people, investing in talking to our support groups, because you're so consumed when you're at home. But to keep that going at this point, because that is going to be critical coming out of this, right? Now, as Chetna ji mentioned, I'm very encouraged to hear that what I'm saying is not true just for urban women who have access to the best of technology. It's true for rural women as well. And how do we actually, as entrepreneurs, keep that network investment going? The third point I would say is, alluded to this in my first point, the whole portfolio is changing now. How do we rethink our, as an entrepreneur, it's always been critical to pivot. If you cannot pivot, you'll perish, right? And that's a very well-known mantra, well-known sort of adage in the world of entrepreneurship, and whichever way we define entrepreneurship. And we saw from the examples of women in rural Maharashtra who've pivoted. I think every entrepreneur right now needs to think about that. There is a massive amount of trend towards localization. At the nano entrepreneur level, that means localization, preference for local foods, preference for locally made. At the mega entrepreneur, that means a general pro-India sentiment. As you think about how do we depend more, how do we capitalize on the opportunity that emerges out of companies rethinking their footprint. In that situation, how does one think about pivoting and actually making sure our existing business model is able to identify and look at some changes and incorporate some of the changes that are happening in terms of the industries that will see, in terms of the sectors that will see more movement. Food products will see more movement. Medical products will see more movement. Software and technology products will continue to be resilient. Online learning will see more movement. Online skilling, online training will see a lot more comfort than we had earlier, right? 6 months back, if you would have spoken about, can I take tuitions remotely? People would have said, no, we like the high touch model. Guess what? Today, that is a lot more possible. Today, people are a lot more open to it. So to me, that's the third big opportunity that emerges, which is, and we're seeing it happen in parts. And I believe every entrepreneur, male or female, but women especially, given they tend to have a far higher ability to pivot, far higher, survival instinct, in my view, to see, okay, in the new world, how will I be fit? They're far less, they're attached, but far less rigid about what is it that they have rebuilt, they have built up all these years.
Thank you. Thank you, Megha. I think those were very interesting takeaways. I do agree, even my observation from our experiences, that women pivot easier. At the same time, women are more sticky as consumers, so they just bring together the most wonderful set of behaviors and traits that are probably are going to be critical in restarting. Well, Megha was the last speaker, but before we really end, I have about 15 minutes, and I'm going to keep the last 10 minutes for questions and answers. But before that, because we want to also come out with, like Alka ji said, that this is a time when heads are coming together in a focused way. We're not just attending meetings. We're doing this because we want to get somewhere. So maybe in the reverse order that I started, if each one of you could, the speakers, the panelists, I'll call out to you, spend about just a minute summarizing one policy recommendation that you might have, at one change that you'd like to see at a macro level that you think could be the answer to the worries that we're seeing, and one characteristic or one model or one behavior change, anything really that you're seeing on the ground that is already part of the next new normal that we must sustain and build back intentionally into the strategy of bouncing back. Megha, I'll start with you.
Sure. So I briefly alluded to this. I think, there are many ideas. Let me talk through one, since you mentioned behavior change. I think a crisis provides the opportunity to make some transformational changes, right? Otherwise, things are gradual, but crisis, people listen. I think this is the time for the government, for the national government and the state governments to develop, to build in their nationwide campaign a narrative around the contribution of everybody, right? They need to bring in the idea of nation building and how women are an absolutely integral part of it. And hence, communities need to enable the involvement of women. Communities need to enable women to participate meaningfully. Corporations need to make sure that their recovery paths are inclusive, because this is more about rebuilding the economy, not just oneself, and make that an issue of pride. There are going to be many very specific, nuanced ideas coming in from the group who's very close to some of these. But, when I look at the macro level, if this is not a time for behavior and for a change in behaviors and mindsets, I don't know, and I hope the next time doesn't come very soon, because it's only crises that will bring out. And we saw, I like to cite the example of Swachh Bharat, which was an amazing amount of change orientation brought in. How do you use this to bring about a change that everybody has to be in? Women need to be enabled, not just by themselves. Like they're, as Chetna ji mentioned, they have the courage to bring themselves in. But this is a message going out to communities, to financial institutions, to corporations, to play a part over here and take pride in it.
Right. Thanks, Megha. I hope you're following UN Women's campaign on Twitter. Some part of it does address the narrative of interdependence, and interdependence, not just in terms of a more charitable relation between the rich and the poor, the franchised and the disfranchised, the learned and the illiterate, but actually a relationship of interdependence between those who bring us food, those who consume food, those who play a role in between, those who work for us, those we work for. The fact that we exist as an economy because the links are all live and are as important as each other. So I think that is an important narrative to building up, and as an important lesson that people have realized themselves, but must be built intentionally into campaigns. Preeti, let me go to you. One policy recommendation and one accidental or intentional learning that you think we should keep.
Well, I'll build on what Megha said around behavior change and mindset. And I believe that it's absolutely appropriate that crisis does trigger transformation. But transformation is a very conscious and intentional lens. We need to either develop it, or we need to adopt it, or we need to act on it. One way or the other, it's not going to seep into our beings on its own. As a policy, what I would highly advocate is that the idea of gender parity and equity needs to be legalized and formalized and actually offered to organizations as a must-do. It's potentially a reflection of our societal gender ratio. To say if there are approximately 50% women and 50% men in the world of the country, in the cross-section of the country, can we actually replicate that in organizations?
Thanks. Thanks, Preeti. I'd love now, of course, love to come back to Uma.
Yeah, thanks. 3 decades ago, when I started my business and I used to talk about women entrepreneurship development, at that point of time, you'd say about 10% of the small enterprises, in those days it was the small scale industries, were women owned. Now, after 3 decades, we are still between 12 and 15%, and we still don't have that exact number. And I somehow feel that a policy for gender disaggregated data collection is very important, because we have a large number of women in the so-called informal sector. They are formal, they run their businesses, they have it, but they're not part of any format in which somebody can approach, be it an NGO, be it a government, doesn't matter. But as long as they're not in part of anything, there is no way, you can reach out, you can connect, and you can build these networks. And I think it's very important that we do something about, the Udyog Aadhar has been a very good mechanism. The GEM portal has got a lot of women entrepreneurs enroll onto it. The International Cooperation Scheme of the government has also gotten a good number of participation of women-owned enterprises on it. But I think we still need to include a very, very large number of them who are not part of any system. And as long as they're not part of that system, there's no way we can do anything to make any change. And I feel that's very important. And that's something which will help build real numbers, and we get to know where we are. And I think that's an area that we need to do. And I think this provides that opportunity. And I think if the MSME can really come out with some very good package for women-owned enterprises, or women entrepreneurs, or self-employed women, I think it also gives that opportunity for them to be part of a larger ecosystem of women-owned enterprises.
Thank you, Umaji. Suhasini, if I can just very briefly hear from you, and then I'll go to Chetna ji.
Right. I'll make 2 policy points and an example, or something that we can do. One is a bailout package for small and micro enterprises. I'm talking especially from the garment industry point of view, because I mean most of them fall in this category, and if there's no support from the government, they are likely to perish, unfortunately. Second is, if we, I mean, 93% of the economy is informal economy, and most of them are women-led, I mean, businesses, small businesses. So if we could have, and in my earlier talk, I told how vulnerable women are in the supply chain, in the garment supply chain especially. So if we could have a floor level social security and safety net for workers or people who do not fall in a formal employment, that would be great, because this pandemic has brought them to, it's precarious, their conditions. If we could have at the policy level, if we can suggest for a floor level social security measures. And something from, as a response, I think when we are seeking as a business, we are seeking a response to come out of it and do the business. It should be done with a gender analysis. Also because we see women have been, I mean, a lot of them have lost their job. Once they want to come back, they are desperate. They'll take any kind of job that is offered. That will put them in a position where they even agree to gender-based violence, sexual harassment in order to get the job. So there's a very complex mix. I would say if the response of the business is not done with gender analysis, the workplace harassment of women will also increase. So we have to be we have to tread very carefully when we plan our way out from this pandemic.
Thank you. Thank you, Suhasini. Chetna ji, if you can very briefly about in a minute, because I believe FICCI has another call, or this Zoom room is like a meeting room, has to be used again at 5 o'clock, and we're at about 4:53. So Chetna ji, if you can in a minute present either a policy recommendation or a part of a new normal that you think should be an intentional part of the new one that we create.
So I would just say that when we are when our women are making masks in 100,000s, and every day they are doing these lunch boxes in like thousands and thousands, when they started it in the third week of March, none of our women said, those who are in business, they said that we want subsidy. We want money for this, and give us that, and then we'll be able to do it. What they said is that, give me a machine where I can cut thousands of meters of cloth, or give me a utensils or a package where I can make food for 500 people, and I will repay that. So what exactly was, as I mentioned, is the ease of working capital. And I just would like to suggest that the way can we have a Udyog credit for working capital, where they can just always swipe it, get some money, repay. Once you repay, you get more. So something repay, more loan I will get. And still the lines of the sun, can we do that?
Yep. Chetna ji, you're breaking up, but I think we heard you. Is the point on a policy recommendation on ease of capital? I don't know if you're still there on the call. I can't see you any longer. But I think that's what you said. Ease of working capital. Again, not charity, not subsidy, but we're making it easier for them. So sorry, but we're just about on time. I'd like to give the last 2 minutes to Alka ji to respond. I know when the government is there, it almost feels like we are asking everybody has, we all have smaller TORs than the government. And I know, Alka ji, this must be an extremely daunting situation for the government, but I want you to know that as stakeholders, we're all in this journey together, and we're all here to support you in the wonderful initiatives that the government is already making. Our job really is to bring to you problems or nuances of problems that may not be obvious, changes that are already happening that should be sustained, and that was what our attempt was. So just to summarize the things that we heard, from a policy perspective is making ease of not just big scale announcements, but ease of capital, mainstreaming behavior change, interdependence, a special package or a special focus on women-owned and women-managed businesses, particularly not the same set of rules for micro enterprises and not to treat them in one monolithic way, but actually differentiate between those enterprises, given that about 12% which was the data quoted, are enterprises that don't have more than 9 people or 9 women. And of course, the use of technology platforms to both bring in working capital, like the one that Chetna ji introduced us to, and also now for creating markets. The new normals that emerged is the need, the not so much need for infrastructure, and the fact that work could be done from home, and that kind of model probably will bring in more women into the web and contribute to increasing women's labor force participation, and a focus on socioeconomic parameters like mental health and support. And of course, when we talk economics, is to also talk about economics that involves behavioral economics and addresses a woman's issue in an integrated way, while we speak about the violence, the barriers she faces about life, and not just the economic side of it. Well, that's that. Alka-ji, we have 3 more minutes. We will send the questions to you. There are only about 2 questions, and both of them are on boosting demand, even if supply was to come back. And I'll leave you with that thought, and then we can summarize probably in the next 3 minutes, and then send a more comprehensive document to you.
So I think it's been a wonderful session because, my head is just buzzing. It's telling me that, we need to relook at a lot of schemes, what we have been doing. And, as it has come out, the times are not going to change, post-COVID times, it's there for all of us to stay, And what my key takeout, what I had written in my notes before we joined the meeting also is that, we need to do a nationwide assessment of, how many women-owned units are there. The Udyog Aadhaar, yes, we have been using it as a tool. And, but when we say that there are nearly 6 crore MSMEs, but I am very clear in my head today that, we need to categorize into the micro, small, and medium. And each sector will need a different kind of treatment, because having, listened to many of the associations for the past few days, and 1 or 2 have been on women also. But, we have generally been talking about these are the benefits which should be coming. But yes, then when we talk about the disparity, if there are 80%, units which are owned by the men and, maybe 20%, maybe some of them might be owned by women, but they are registered, whatever way it is. But, there is a disparity in the numbers. Jyoti, are you there? Can you hear me?
Yes, I'm there.
Jyoti, my request is we need to quickly activate, all the chapters of FICCI, and get an assessment done, like what is every state, because each state is doing something, the schemes everywhere, every state is also making some announcements, are any of the states doing anything special for the women? I would also want you to please, whatever we've discussed today, if we can note down that. Nishtha, your angle also, if you can just flag it to me.
Sure.
On a daily basis, when we are talking to the minister, and I prepare for him, which association said what, So, the FICCI women's wing and the women chapter has been meeting our minister regularly for the past few months, on various issues. And so we would, if at least a few chapters also, by the weekend, if they can flag their issues, it will give strength to the proposal that, it is coming from the different states. It is not that we just did this one meeting, and we are coming out with this paper that, these are the issues which we need to flag, And like, we from the ministry, we have been, doing, like, I don't know how many of you are aware of this PMEGP scheme, which we run, where, the women-centric units do get a lot of additional benefits. But, when Chetna ji says that, and I am myself a firm believer, subsidy doesn't really help, what you
Sorry, Alka-ji, probably you saw my hand.
Yes.
We're sorry, we're just about at 5 o'clock.
No, it's okay. It's okay. Please flag the issue, send it to me.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so we're working on it, and it is, you know, I would love to have a one-to-one chat with all of you. You know, please share your numbers, or I take the numbers from Jyoti, and you know, we'll talk about it more. You know, and the more, you know, we join in the chain, the better it is for us. You know, so that we come out with something concrete. And for me also, it's been a lot of learning today. You know, and there was another webinar which I told Jyoti I will, you know, hop from here to there. I've not even looked at calls, you know. So it's been really.
No, thank you so much. Thank you that you stayed. I think it's been very encouraging.
Thank you. Thank you, Alka.
It's my learning. It's my learning curve today also, and it's been great. You know, thank you, Jyoti, for having me here.
No, thanks for joining in. I know how